This is a Broadcast Devices tutorial.
We'd like to tell you what we've been doing to make improvements to the very popular DPS-100D series power meters from BDI. This is the Generation 2 DPS-100D. I happen to have one right here in my hand. This is the DPS-100D-N. It is an N-style connector in and out. Many folks don't realize we make one this small, but we do. This particular meter is 200 watts full scale, but we can make these up to a kilowatt full scale. And the other significant change in this particular meter is that this is a broadband meter, 80 to 1000 megahertz. And you'll notice no slugs, nothing to change. It's all done in software. And the software is the big story, and that's what we want to show you. We've upgraded the firmware to run the meter. We've added some significant improvements to the operation of the meter. And most importantly, we've eliminated the requirement to use Adobe Flash to run the product. This is a completely flash-free product. It's a Windows app. There is a basic browser introduction that you need to do for setup, but it's HTML5, very simple to do. So we're going to get into all that right now. All right, so now let's take a look at the DPS-100D series power meter Generation 2 application software that BDI has developed. And so what we have is the open screen here, and you'll notice right away that you can have up to 5 meters connected. And these can be either co-located or they can be in different physical locations. Doesn't matter, as long as you have an internet connection or a network connection to wherever your meters are located, you can look at them with the same app. So let's go ahead and open up meter number 1 here. Of course, you can give them names as well, as these are the default names. And let's bring that up on the screen and get that sort of leveled up so everybody at home can follow along. Let's see, I guess that's about right. Okay. Move it over a little bit. There you go. So this is the first screen, which is the main screen, the meter screen, which would be after the initial setup of the unit to get it the way you like it, your preference. And we'll go through a lot of that here in just a bit. And we've changed the look, of course, of the main screen, and we've added a few things. So let's go through them very quickly. First thing you'll notice is that we have frequency information displayed on the main page. Now, it may seem obvious, but if you have to keep track of more than one meter, you may want to know what frequency it's on. So we have that displayed. Of course, the name of the meter will show up over here in the upper right-hand corner, and so you can keep track of it that way. So you can call the meter by its site name or call letters or whatever you want to put in there. Now, we've added this frequency information because every meter that we build for FM broadcast use and for television use is calibrated on a specific frequency or band of frequency. So we put the specific frequency in there that the meter is called at. Now, this can be changed in the field. You can now change the frequency that the meter will be calibrated at in the field for every FM frequency. So everything from 88 to 108, you can park it on a channel of your desire so that if you need to move the meter from one location to another, it's easily recalibrated. Okay, so we added that. That's a new feature. Next, you have your forward and reflected power, which is normally displayed. And we've added a third item here in this row, which is the VSWR indication. Now, we always had VSWR indication, but you had to choose between reflected power or VSWR, so now we have given you both. Next is the internal and external temperature sensors and the pressure sensor. And the internal is there with every meter. We supply an internal temperature sensor that measures the surface temperature of the directional coupler. The external temperature sensor is our model number TMP-100, which you can order as an accessory, and that plugs in and will read out in degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius, depending on how you have it set up. We'll show you that in a bit. And then, of course, the transmission line pressure gauge, which we also can supply as an accessory. That's our PSW-100, and it will display 0 to 15 PSI, and currently it's reading, well, 4 to 5 PSI at the moment. And then we've added these set points, and what they are some set points that you can keep track of tolerances. You can keep track of your internal and external temperature sensors, and the line pressure sensor, forward power greater than a certain amount, forward power less than a certain amount, and then the reflected power being greater than a certain amount. And of course, you can change this to VSWR. I'll show you how to do that in the setup in a bit. And you'll notice that you have these green check marks, which means that one means that the temperature is not greater than 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, I hope not, because this one's back in the workshop. But the external temperature sensor is indicating that the temperature is above 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It's reading 71, so it's calling your attention to it. Now, you probably wouldn't have it this low. At a transmitter facility, you'd probably have it up somewhere maybe in the 80s or 90 degrees to make sure that the air conditioning system or the cooling system is working properly. But this is just a demonstration to show you that it's calling attention to it. Same thing with a pressure sensor. This one's kind of been winking back and forth between 4 and 5 psi. You probably wouldn't have it as tight as this. I think we have it set for 4 psi, so every time it changes, it's going to go up or down here. It takes a little while for it to catch up. Of course, forward reflected power. Forward power is showing 10 kilowatts as no greater than, which it isn't because it's 0. But of course, this one is showing that it's got an issue because it's less than 9 kilowatts. Again, it's 0. And reflective power is less than 500 watts. Moving over to the GPI status, of course, every DPS-100D power meter has 6 general purpose inputs that are available for you to use, and they keep track of any kind of a switch closure. And of course, we have a couple here as an example, a door ajar. You might want to keep track of how often someone accesses the site. And when they do that, you'll be able to keep track of that with something like that. This one we have set for patch panel. The reason we kind of mix these up here a little bit is because we're going to show you how you can set this patch panel switch for an interlock group, which you can control interlocks with. And then, of course, over here we have, just summing up the main page, we have the control side of things where it says transmitter on-off. You can actually program one of the 2 onboard relays to act as a transmitter on-off command, and that's a remote control command, very basic remote control command. And very often stations will use the meter at a low power site or perhaps a translator, or where there's only a single transmitter, to actually be the remote control for the site. You can turn the transmitter on and off, and you can keep track of the GPIs, temperature, pressure, and the power parameters as displayed here. And then last but not least is BDI's proprietary trademark 3-strike VSWR protection system. And this is the counter that keeps track of how many strikes you've had. And of course, it's a 3 strikes you're out system. You know, if you have more than 2 strikes, it will open the interlock and cause the reset button to illuminate red, calling to your attention the fact that you need to do something about that. We'll show you how that works in the setup here in just a bit. So we're ready to go do that, but before I do that, I just want to go over here. I should have done this one first, actually, but this is the connect screen. You're just going to put your IP parameters in and connect to the meter. You only need to do that once, and then that's set up for this particular meter. And then over here, it'll display the model number, unit name, firmware revision, serial number of the power sensor, and the directional coupler ID. That's new. We have the directional coupler serial number displayed in the firmware, so that if you need service and you call us and we need to ask you what the serial numbers are of the sensor and the directional coupler, you'll be able to tell us without actually having to go to the site. So let's jump over to setup. We're going to skip over events. We'll cover that last. Setup is the basic way that you want the meter to behave and how you want the main page to look, essentially. So there are a number of things that you can do. Again, we have the alarm usernames, and you notice that there's the familiar door ajar and patch panel we've set up on the first 2 GPIs. And you can simply just go in there and change that by backspacing over, and you can just put anything you want. I'm just going to put test in here for right now and put that in there like so. And then that should display on the main page, which it does, and there you go. Okay, so that's how you do that. And then the alarm enables have to do with these various parameters. If you want to keep track of these things via email, you can select these various parameters. Right now, I think we have VSWR fault selected, pressure warning, the state of the first input, which is the door ajar, And we also want to keep track of the VSWR warning. Well, 1 is a warning, so let's say you have that set for 1.5 to 1, and you really want to know if it gets to be 2 to 1. That would be over here. That would be the fault. In other words, that would go into fault at that point. We'll show you how to set that up. And anytime you have an interlock open, you can set it to keep track of that. So if somebody comes up and pulls that patch in the patch panel, well, you're going to know in a hurry because it'll probably be off the air, but this will tell you why there's an interlock open. And you can set up the other inputs to keep track of if you like. So next is to take a look at the display, and that really is, we're referring here to the display on the power meter itself. Each power meter has a small LCD backlit display for convenience, and this allows you to customize that a bit. You can now display VSWR on that display or return loss or row. Of course, forward and reflected power are always there, but we've added this feature where the VSWR shows up on that display along with the fact that you can change it to return loss in dB or in row. As a matter of fact, let's change it to return loss. We'll go back and take a look, and you'll see now it's in return loss in dB. It's not showing any because we have no forward or reflected power at the moment. Okay, so you can also set the temperature reading on this is again on the sensor itself to read out in Celsius or Fahrenheit. That's different than on the main page of the display here of the meter itself. That's showing Fahrenheit. We'll show you how to change that as well. But this is, so you can have one set up for Celsius and one set up for Fahrenheit if you like, or you can have them both the same. It's really up to you. The last item on this display settings is show pulse power. Now that actually shows up on the main page here. So if I select that, we've added this feature actually to the meter so that you can actually calculate repetitive pulse power. And the way we do that is the user puts in the pulse width and the rep rate in microseconds, and then the meter will do a calculation using that information and the true RMS power that the forward and reflected power indicators are showing. Now, we did that for radar customers and things like that. It may not necessarily be applicable to FM broadcaster for TV, but those TV broadcasters that are taking care of radar sets of their own, weather radar and that kind of thing, may find this useful. Of course, we can set these up for different frequencies for that purpose. Wouldn't be used at 98.1 certainly. So let's go back in, and we're just going to get rid of that for the time being so it doesn't clutter up the screen, since we're not really going to use that. The next item on the setup, and again, these are most of the time, these are just one-time setup items. Email, and that's just where you're going to set up your outgoing email information so that the emails that are set up here know where to go out from, and that's pretty straightforward. And of course, you have up to 3 email recipients that you can send emails to, and you can customize the types of emails that they get. All means that they're going to get false warnings, and a periodic log. You can set it up so that you get none or false end warnings. So that one's set up for all. We'll leave it there for now. And then you can go in here and you can set up a periodic log that you can be sent, and you can set yourself up for all or for that, and you'll get all the information. Of course, you can set that up for 15-minute hourly or daily, or you can just turn it off if you're not interested in having a log emailed to you. And of course, after you get this all set up, you can go ahead and send yourself a test email to make sure that it works. So the next tab to take a look at is the network settings for network time protocol, and you can select it or deselect it. If you don't have access to network time protocol for some reason, you can turn that off, and it would use the real-time clock in the unit itself. Just about every DPS-100D meter that we've built supports network time protocol. It was, I think, after serial number 200 is actually where we activated network time protocol. So if you have a meter that has a serial number greater than 200, then you have that built in. And so we give you the basic parameters. You can put your own server in there if you have a different one than the one that we default to. You can adjust to your time zone. Of course, we're here on the East Coast of the United States, so we're -5 UTC, but you can go in and change that. Just real quickly, let me just do that and show you that. Let's go over to, I guess that would be Atlantic time, right out in the kind of in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. you'll notice that when I made a change that this little red arrow shows up to say, hey, you know, you changed this. Do you want to accept that? And yes, I do. And so now it'll be minus 4 UTC. We did that so that if you accidentally hit something, let's say we change it. Well, let me go back to 4 here, which is where it was. And now it should be showing, an hour differently. But if I accidentally and changed something I didn't really mean to, like that, if I move away from this page and I come back, it should be where I left it. Okay, so you have to accept it. So that's why we did that. Let's put it back on 5. And of course, if you're not using network time protocol and you want to change the time and date, you can absolutely put that in and set that. Alrighty, next is remote. There's a little bit going on here, so let's go over this very quickly. We mentioned interlock groups that are associated with the 5 available GPIs. Of course, the 6th is always it's connected to an external interlock open. If that opens, it will open the interlock. But you can set up the other GPIs and different combinations. You may have different setups for different modes of operation, and you want to keep track of interlocks, and you can do that. So for example, we set up interlock group 2 for that one that we call patch panel. That's on input number 2. So now if I go ahead and enable that, what we do is we're going to go back to the meter page, and I predict that it's going to show the interlock is open. And the reason for that is because I don't have a connection to anything on interlock input number 2, and I can't reset it because that's open, and that's keeping the RF off because somebody went and pulled the patch. So we can go back in and we can get rid of that, and then that should reset it. The only time you actually have to do a reset is if you have a 3-strike event that's either caused by well, not return loss, but VSWR or reflected power. That's what these enables are for, and again, you can use these at will. Over on the other side here, on the right-hand side, are the DC scales. Every DPS-100D power meter also has a pair of proportional DC outputs, 0 to 5 volts DC, that can be used with a legacy type remote control that has analog metering inputs and does not have a means of communicating with a meter such as SNMP, which this meter, of course, is SNMP capable. So we allow you to set the scaling up so that the proportionality will be right, and you can go in there and set that up individually for forward and reflected voltage. Now the next thing are the 2 interlock parameters, the interlock relay parameters that you can set up. Remember, we said there are 2 onboard relays in the DPS-100D. So you can set up, they're defaulted for interlock, but you can change the first relay between interlock and alarm. Remember those alarms that we set up that allow you to determine how the relays will behave. So the first one is generally interlock. Relay 2, you have a couple of more choices. Interlock alarm, transmitter on and off. Let's go ahead and select that, and you should see when we go to there now the transmitter on off buttons are not grayed out anymore, so they can be used. That will control that second relay. We also have another 4th option here, RF presence, which is basically holding this relay closed anytime a preset amount of RF power is applied to the power meter, which you set up on the RF page, which we're going to do here very shortly. And then you can select whether you have your 3-strike event or your reflected power or VSWR protection on VSWR or on reflected power. Because right now it says trigger on VSWR and that's not selected, it's showing reflected power. So if we had a reflected power indication of greater than 500 watts for a period greater than the 3-strike count, it would then open the interlock and this would show reset here. We can go and change that to VSWR by doing that, and now when we go over here it should show, well, we have to go back in and do one more thing. We have to select VSWR here and then come over here, and we have that selected. Now it should be showing VSWR and VSWR here as it is, and it's defaulted for 2 to 1. You probably would set it lower than that, which we'll show you how to do here in just a moment. One last thing on this page is RS-45 address. The DPS-100D meter can be used in conjunction with BDI's SWP-200 series motorized RF switch controllers. Up to 2 can be connected, so you need to have different addresses. That can be set here. The SWP-300 remote control system can also accept up to 2 meters. And then, of course, we have our SWP206 Digimonitor antenna monitor system, which can accept up to 8 meter inputs, so we have 8 different addresses, and you would set each individual meter up here to do that. We're going to leave it set to defaulted to 1 because we only have the 1 meter that we're concerning ourselves with. Last and certainly not least is the RF setup page, where you can go in and put your parameters in for set points. Remember those from over here, okay, forward, power greater than and less than, and you can see them here that they're set. You can go in and change them. Reflective power, your internal and external temperature sensors, pressure set point, VSWR fault. So let's go in and let's say the warning is, oh, that's even pretty high. I mean, for an FM guy, you probably want to be less than, I always wanted to be less than 1.2. When it gets greater than that, you want to know about it. So let's set this at maybe 1.6. And set them both. And let them catch up here. And we'll go over here now, and you can see that that's now 1.6 to 1 is for the fault. And that's pretty much what you do. Now the RF presence threshold, that's set for 100 watts right now. You can set it down lower, or you can set it up higher. Now the reason we provided this is this makes a handy place for you to grab a contact closure to let people know there's RF on someplace. This is used a lot in RF safety programs at multi-use sites, where you might want to light a light to indicate to a tower climber that an antenna is active, and this lets you do that. Alrighty, so we're done setting up the meter. The only other thing that's left is the events page, which we can jump over to, and that basically helps you keep track of various warning events. We had a low pressure warning, and we've got 3 events here, so we've got some stuff going on here. The temperature sensor, and what else did we have? We had something else. Oh, one of the relays was open here. We set this one up for GPI2 for an interlock open, and we did force it open, so that caused that event. So that keeps track of that. And this is also part of the periodic log that you get. And of course you can scan back and look at different events. Here's today's date as this is being recorded. And then you can purge the log if you like and get rid of everything, and it'll clear out. And then of course over here we have one last thing to look at, the RF presence statistics. This tells you how many hours during the month's time that there was RF present on the power meter. And of course this is a test meter in the shop, so it's only showing 2.55 hours for the month of April, and it hasn't been on since January apparently, and it keeps the previous month and the current month active in here, so you can keep track of how many hours you're actually broadcasting. So that's the DPS-100D Generation 2 operational software that's available from us, and it works with Windows 10 and Windows 7 and 8. And so we'll keep track of the current operating systems and keep it up to date for you. And this is a simple download and install on your computer, and you can keep better track of your DPS-100D power meters. So that wraps it up for this installment. We appreciate you sticking with us and taking a look at this.
Quality products, quality service, and quality solutions from Broadcast Devices.